I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Brenda Barton, and I'm the chairman of the Agriculture and Water Committee in the House of Representatives. We're here today to listen to the Yuma constituency's concerns regarding the future water legislation, and I appreciate and thank you very much for attending this meeting today. It's important to us to listen to your concerns and the solutions that you may have. No one knows your community better than you do. So we are really anxious and appreciate all of the slips that have been turned in to talk to us today and share your ideas and your interests. We appreciate that very much. And the black cases here in the front, if you have a written statement that you would like to make part of the official record, please, we appreciate that very much as well, and you can put it inside the black box in the tray there. But I'd like to start out with introductions, and we'll start, actually, we could start all the way over there to the very end with our special speaker today. If you just would introduce and go to the right around here.
Yeah, Herb Gunther. I'm part human. I lived here in Tacna for the better part of 30-some years and raised my kids out there. They all went through Mohawk Valley School and Antelope High School, and they're all pretty much independent. So for all those involved, thank you. But anyway, I'm just here as an advisor, and we'll be making a presentation on how we got to House Bill 2338, the process by which that evolved, before we get into your actual comments. So I'm pleased to be here, and thanks for coming.
I'm Aaron Wonders. I'm the Assistant Legislative Research Analyst for the Agriculture and Water Committee.
I'm Representative Lisa Otondo. I represent Legislative District 4. I am a Yuma girl, and I am the daughter of Robert F. Otondo, longtime farmer in Welton, Mohawk Valleys. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Frank Pratt. I am a representative from District 8. Representing Pinal and Gila counties, and chair of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee, and vice chair of the Ag and Water Committee.
And again, I'm Representative Brenda Barton. I represent District 6, which begins at the Grand Canyon, going down through Williams and Flagstaff to Sedona, Verde Valley, Cottonwood. I live in Payson. My district goes farther east then into Snowflake, Heber, Overgard. I lived in Yuma for a couple of years. I worked at YPG for one of the contractors out there. My mother still lives here, so I'm really pleased to be here. I can visit with my mom today, and we look forward to hearing your ideas today.
Good morning, I'm Darren Mitchell. I represent District 13, which runs from Yuma all the way up to Wickenburg. So thank you to the Redistricting Commission for that. I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to hearing what all you guys have to say.
Good morning, I'm Gina Cash. I'm the Legislative Research Analyst for the Arizona House of Representatives.
Hello, I'm Tammy Stowe. I'm a Policy Advisor for the majority in the House of Representatives.
Thank you. And I want to make a note that in the presentation, there is an error or a correction slide on slide number 21. So just so you know that when that slide comes up in the presentation. Now I'd like to turn the proceedings over to Representative Darren Mitchell to chair the balance of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barton. The first order of business is going to be our presentation by Herb Gunther regarding the Water Resource Development Commission reports and House Bill 2338, Regional Water Augmentation Authorities. Herb?
Thanks, Darren. Anyway, the beginning of the process started with the Water Resources Development Commission, which was established under House Bill 2661 in 2010. And what it did is it charged the committee with assessing the Arizona's water needs for the next 25, 50, and 100 years. There were 17 commissioners, 9 ex officio members, 7 advisory members, and it had the idea was to produce a final report by October 2011, and the committee was to be sunsetted by September 30th of 2012. You can see the representation. It was very wide representation from around the state, both industrial, agricultural, the Indian communities, the cities, conservation groups, and what have you. Just a lot of people were involved in that committee. 5 committees were formed, or actually they were subcommittees of the main committee to help meet the statutory obligations of the committee: the Population Committee, the Water Supply and Demand Committee, the Environmental Committee, Finance Committee, and Legislative Recommendations Committee. The final report was produced in October of 2011, and it projected that the total demand statewide would range from a low of 8.1 million acre-feet in 2035 to a high of 10.6 million acre-feet in 2110. To give you an example, right now our water budget in the state is 7.6 million acre-feet. The final report also specified that decisions must be made regarding what solutions will be most effective in discrete regions, what funding mechanisms are available, and what legislative changes would be necessary. It also recommended that the WRDC be given until the sunset date of September 30th of 2012 to continue development, evaluation, and prioritization of potential solutions or legislative proposals. The Legislative Recommendations Committee, they were directed to continue consideration and develop final legislative recommendations for funding future water supply development that would be necessary, and the full report deadline was to be, this is the addendum to the final, would be August 1st of 2012. So they began meeting late 2011. They developed the interim memorandum, presented it to the RWDC in April of 2012 with detailed recommendations, and summarized a project proposal matrix. It listed 34 potential water supply development projects. It was intended to be used to understand scale, magnitude, and projected timing of the types of projects being considered statewide, and it projected that the cost of potential statewide development projects over the next 50-plus years would exceed $3 billion. So the recommendations coming from the committee and produced in the supplemental report, which was dated September of 2012, was to authorize the formation of regional water augmentation authorities. They were to be voluntary organizations of existing governmental and other entities formed to assist local communities to develop future water supplies and infrastructure to meet future demand. The membership formation within an augmentation authority was strictly voluntary. It had to be 2 or more entities. One must be a public agency. Other entities may be municipalities, private water companies, other water entities, counties, private entities, and Indian tribes. They must have a clear public purpose, and the augmentation authority would be formed on by the adoption of resolutions by each entity that wanted to participate. The oversight of the augmentation authority was to be by a board of directors of representatives of members. It would be a political subdivision and a municipal corporation, which would be subject to the open meeting laws and public records statutes. It would be, their powers and duties would include plan and design and construct and operate water projects, lawfully acquire and sell water rights, acquire and sell water except to customers of municipal providers, treat water unless treatment conflicts with another entity's jurisdiction and the entity did not consent to the treatment. Vested right protections would apply and limited power of eminent domain. So it would authorize the augmentation authority to obtain funding from revenue bonds, user fees, membership fees, water infrastructure funds, grants, proceeds from loans or advances, capital contributions from private parties and other sources, except for ad valorem taxes and general obligation bonds. So that led to the introduction of regional water augmentation authorities, House Bill 2338, this past session. Some of the major issues involved in the hearings was the definition of augmentation. It was not defined. However, a water augmentation authority could acquire, hold, and assign water rights. They could acquire and sell water. All actions taken by the authority under this chapter should be in accordance with state and federal law. It was formed similar to the way other augmentation authorities were formed, such as the Mojave County Water Authority over on the western side of the state and the Pinal Water Augmentation Authority in central Arizona. The authority must give notice to the Board of Supervisors of each county in which the proposed use of water from the authority will be located, and file organizational documents, including membership, water issues to be addressed by the authority, and proposed locations of use of the water. They would also have to publish a notice of the authority's formation in appropriate newspapers. Any aggrieved person could protest the formation of an augmentation authority by filing an action in the Superior Court. Oversight would be provided by the Board of Directors of the authority. Municipal and county members have elected governing bodies. Private water company rates are regulated by the Arizona Water Commission. The authority is a political subdivision, again, subject to the open meeting law and public records requirements. And all actions taken by the authority under House Bill 2338 would be required to be in accordance with state and federal law. Eminent domain, that was another issue that is raised, and of course it's a buzzword in Western water or in any Western undertaking. We're very concerned about eminent domain. The authority, for the benefit of its members in the bill, could exercise the power of eminent domain for purposes of condemning real property, that is necessary for pipelines, infrastructure, and easements for the authority water projects. The authority shall not exercise the power of eminent domain to condemn water rights, wells, existing water systems, land owned by another governmental entity, or land for purposes of drilling wells or to acquire electrical facilities. And again, this is a slide that was corrected. The only thing that had been left out was condemning water rights, and wells. They cannot use eminent domain for those purposes. So there are, of course, potentials for conflicts with existing water entities. The authority can acquire and sell water unless the sale of water is directly to customers of a municipal provider, and the municipal provider did not consent to the sale of water by the authority. Also, the authority could treat water unless the treatment conflicts with another entity's jurisdiction, and that entity did not consent to the treatment by the authority. The parameters or boundaries of the authority would be determined by the infrastructure, not necessarily the geographic or political boundaries. As far as terminating authority membership, authority consisting of 2 members was addressed in the bill, but authority consisting of more than 2 members was not addressed in the bill, and probably needs to be worked on. So that's basically the premises for the formation of House Bill 2338, and I'm sure you have comments. A lot of you were in Phoenix on the 19th of February and made comments at the hearing before Representative Barton, and you might expound upon those considerations or those concerns, and we'll look forward to hearing your comments. You know, the early bird might get the worm, but it's that second mouse that gets the cheese.
Thanks, Herb. Actually, I'd like to take a moment just to thank you for all the help that you've given to the committee so far and the dedication of your time. So I know you'll be helping us in the future, and I just want to let you know how much we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are now ready to start taking our public testimony, and it looks like, based on the number of people that have signed in, that we will be able to give you 3 minutes each. So we're going to have a timer up here, and if you would try just to stay within that time limit, we'll let you know as you're getting close, but that way everybody can be heard, and that's really what's important. So if you can focus your thoughts a little bit, that would be greatly appreciated. And we're going to start with Mayor Krieger, wherever you are. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming down and offering the citizens of Yuma a forum and an opportunity to talk to you face-to-face, to meet with you here at the forum and even inside discussions. And thank you all for coming. It's very, very important for us to have an opportunity to address this issue that is critical to the survivability of our city and our community. I'm going to speculate that you understand quite well, given some of your background, the tremendous, tremendous contribution that this agricultural community makes to the nation, not just Arizona, but to the nation. One of the biggest concerns that I heard with the recent proposed legislation was the lack of elected officials' accountability built into the program. Passing on that authority on to unelected people that would tend to create a very difficult situation to affect change and hold to account those people that are elected to legislate that authority. So that was a great concern. One of the elements that I think is not being considered to a great degree is we know what the demands are. We have a pretty good idea of what the uses are, but there has not been a comprehensive thought process to augment the supply that comes to the state or even to the southwest Arizona or southwest United States via the Colorado River. And somehow, somewhere along the line, a grand scheme or a larger thought process, I think, needs to be looked at a part of this discussion. I don't know exactly what that solution is. Some of it seems to be so large of a scale that is unimaginable. But in the history of the United States and the world, we have the Erie Canal, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. These large projects have literally changed the world. And I don't think it's unreasonable to consider a project of that scale that would augment the Colorado River somehow. Desalination, other things that are improving the technology, or technology is advancing rapidly around the world through proven technology, particularly in the Middle East. On the conservation side, I don't believe that you're going to find an agricultural community that has done a better job of utilizing the water in the most efficient way possible. I think our community and our state can set the standard for conservation efforts. There's more to do in cities and towns, and I think it's reasonable for that consideration to be made relative to what homeowners use, how they use it relative in the desert Southwest where they have irrigated lawns or xeriscape, particularly municipalities and the state highway system and those kinds of things to reduce that demand and still capitalize on the aesthetics of communities. Very important. So those are the things that I want you to think about a little bit. The billion-dollar industry that we have here in this community must be prioritized and put at the top. And those are the justifications that I think the state is going to have to put in place. Thank you so much again for coming, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next speaker will be Paul Johnson, and after that will be Roger Gingrich. So if you want to get ready, and that way we won't waste as much time in between speakers. So if Paul Johnson with the City Council, and then Roger Gingrich.
Good morning. Welcome to Yuma. Thank you for coming down here, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, and our esteemed water expert, Herb Gunther. You're going to hear a lot of detail about the importance of water in Yuma and how it is important to the whole state that the water stays here. But I would like to talk about another subject, and that is the governance of these proposed water augmentation authorities. And right in the information that you displayed, it's very clear that these are not augmentation authorities, they're water transfer authorities. If you want to see real water augmentation, go up to Las Vegas and look at the Southern Nevada Water District. They pay for water conservation measures, even to replacing your lawn and putting in artificial turf to save water. They don't transfer it from one place to another. They'd like to, and they're trying to, but they're actually augmenting, not transferring. The language in this original bill and what you've shown today really reminds me of how the Los Angeles Metropolitan Water District secretly bought up the water rights in the Owens River Valley and killed the farming and those towns there about 100 years ago. It's being done in the dark with almost no public input and no elected officials having any say in it. I think sunshine and public hearings cures a lot of potential abuses such as what the Los Angeles Metropolitan Water District did to the Owens River Valley. Therefore, I'd like to suggest to you that you include the following transparency measures in any legislation. One, that these water authorities must include 2 or more public agencies that have publicly elected boards, and they must be approved after public hearings and votes. 2, the formation of these authorities must be approved by the County Board of Supervisors after public hearings and a public vote in the county where they're formed. The Water Authority Board should be elected by the public so that they can answer to the voters, not appointed officials that have no control by the voters. I'd also like to suggest that if the source of the water is from outside the county where the water authority is formed, that it must be approved by the Board of Supervisors of the donor county after public hearings and a public vote. If the source of the water is from within the boundaries of an irrigation district or association, it should be approved by that irrigation district's board and the water rights holders of that district. If it's from a city, it should be approved by the public hearings and a public vote of the city. And I think any use of eminent domain must be approved by the donor county board of supervisors and the applicable irrigation districts. And finally, any bonds or funding that are issued to accomplish the ends of this organization must be the sole responsibility of the authority or receiving county. I think we really need to shine as much sunshine on this as we can so that people are treated fairly and we don't end up with what happened to the Owens River Valley. You could destroy an extremely productive industry here and kill this county and a community. And you'd have impacts all up the western side of the state if you did that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gingrich. And Russell McLeod will be on deck.
Well, first of all, let me welcome you all to the third largest metropolitan area in the state of Arizona, something a lot of people don't understand. My title is City of Yuma Water Resources Coordinator, and I've been involved in water issues for the City of Yuma for 26 years. I consider myself a student of then Representative, then Senator, then Director Herb Gunther. City currently supplies water and wastewater services to over 100,000 people, and that doesn't include winter visitors. Our industry, number one industry, of course, is what we're here to talk about. It is a $3 billion industry. It's no different, in many respects, than an industry such as the Intel chip plant in Chandler, which uses a whole lot of water. They wouldn't want to give up the water to supply that plant. We don't want to give up the water to supply our number one industry. The biggest concern that the City of Yuma has, and this was brought up in subcommittee meetings, and it was ignored. And we'll bring it up again. This is not the first time that we have faced a threat to our number one industry. Back in the late 80s, we found out that cities in the Phoenix area were buying farmland just for the water rights to meet their 100-year water supply requirements for development. Well, it's back again. And there's one big problem that was not mentioned when Herb discussed the Augmentation Authority. It's third-party impacts. What happens when you take land out of production and that land is no longer producing income to our industry? People get hurt. Small businesses that so rely on working with the agriculture industry may have to go out of business. Now, who's going to pay for the third-party impacts? And certainly, we can justify them. And one of the questions then is, who's going to get the impacts? A lot of people like to compare us to the Palo Verde irrigation district in Southern California, which follows land for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And they suffered third-party impacts, but most of their agriculture is to feed animals. Our industry feeds people, and our industry has a much greater trickle-down effect. We'd ask that you consider these third-party impacts in any kind of legislative work that comes up. For example, there are some areas that don't need any help. I would give you, as an example, Flagstaff, Prescott Valley.
Sir, you have about 30 more seconds.
They have spent an awful lot of money preparing for getting their water. We don't deny anybody that we would legislation that helps other communities sustain their economic growth and vitality. However, House Bill 2338 doesn't do anything for some areas. We don't see the right to hurt some and not take into consideration the pain for others. In closing, I'm going to bring up something that then Representative Gunther told me a long time ago. He said, Roger, never forget, it's far better to be upstream with a shovel than downstream with a lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you. Russell McLeod. Russ Clark, you're on deck.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Russell McLeod, Yuma County Supervisor, District 2. I apologize for basically reading, but I knew that time would be limited, and this will keep me on track. And
time's up.
As I'm reflecting on what has brought us together here today, several things occur to me. Arizona has been a leader among the states in working for local control over our future and our state's rights. We all know that local control is the most efficient way we have of working together to solve challenges that face us. As a county supervisor, I've had to deal with the impacts to our community that have been pushed onto us by the state legislature, such as the sweeping of revenue sources and shifting of costs from the state to the counties in order to balance the state's budget. Such detrimental impacts make local elected officials very leery of overly broad or powerful statewide authorities. We do not need another layer of bureaucracy getting in the way of local entities coming together to solve important issues to all of us. It is inefficient to add a layer of government when all that is really needed is a cooperative effort between the existing entities that govern water use and resources. Policies and procedures already exist to transfer water or water rights, and there are elected officials who already have the authority to engage in that process. Community leaders and elected officials from an area that is in need of water can sit down with another community's leaders and elected officials and work within existing laws to create an agreement that is beneficial to both communities. The last thing we need is a new law that creates even the impression that one community can take from another. That's not the Arizona way. As you know, it is always possible that a law created today with good intentions can be misinterpreted or twisted into something very different from the original intent in the future. This must be avoided. It's easy for people in urban centers to forget where their food comes from, and it's easy to point the finger at agricultural uses and declare that they use too much water. This could easily be the source of a new law's misuse in the future, despite today's intentions. It is shameful that we depend on other nations for our energy. Heaven forbid we should subrogate ourselves to other nations for our food supply. We need to follow an open process where all stakeholders are working together for the good of all of Arizona. Who knows what possibilities may exist when everyone is working together for the good of all. What we do not need are new laws designed to circumvent today's laws. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, the newest member of the board, I believe.
That's right, the rookie. Mr. Chairman, distinguished committee, thanks so much for coming to Yuma and listening to what we have to say. Obviously, it's a large room. Obviously, a lot of people are concerned, and you may not know this. We've been talking about you for a little while, and there's a lot of ink that's been spent at the newspaper and airtime on the radio because humans are concerned. Humans are concerned of what HB 2338 was and the possibility of losing probably some of what we had. The definition of augmentation seems to be a little cluttered. Augmentation, at times throughout the bill, seemed to be transfer, and transfer is something that is of a concern. Something about attending all the meetings that have been going on in Yuma and all the conversations been going on to Yuma, it's very obvious to me that the people in Yuma care about the state of Arizona, care about the conditions of the entire state, not just Yuma, and want to be more involved in any solutions that happen throughout the state. We're aware of the possible problems that it could cause, transfers and losing our water, losing some of the water. We've seen the devastation in the Imperial Valley in some areas, devastation not only to the agriculture, but all the ancillary businesses that support agriculture, as well as the communities that thrive off of the agriculture business and the ancillary businesses that are there. We ask that you keep Yuma involved in state solutions and that augmentation starts to become meaning sources for new water, and we explore new water, and we eliminate transfer. Any eminent domain is a concern and is obviously scary when we start talking about government taking land, taking property, or having that power, and we'd like that limited, of course. And then if we set up a committee, a water committee, that does not have elected officials, that potentially has the power to change our lives, we have real problems with. We'd like to be involved in the solution. There's a lot of talent here in Yuma, and obviously you've reached out to that talent. Obviously you're engaged. Obviously you want to know, and I thank you for your time.
It's the first time you didn't take up all your time, Mr. Clark. Mr. Ferguson, you're next. And Marvin Marlett is on deck.
Good morning, I'm Greg Ferguson, Chairman of the Yuma County Board of Supervisors, and there's a lot of people here that know a heck of a lot more about water than me, so I'm not even going to go into that. And I'm not going to repeat what's been said. I just want to thank Representative Barton, because if it wasn't for your courage and your political wherewithal, we wouldn't even be here today. And I thank you for holding the bill.
Now we're ahead of schedule. Thank you. And Bobby McDermott will be next.
Thank you. Chairman Barton, members of the committee, I appreciate you being down here and listening to our concerns. I'm Marvin Marlatt. I am one of the elected members of the Board of Directors of Welton Mohawk Irrigation and Drainage District. My family's been farming in the Welton Mohawk Valley for as long as there's been an irrigation district there, and we appreciate the privilege of the life we have here. There are just a few points I want to make regarding the issue at hand. First of all, we believe there is really no need for an augmentation bill or anything similar. there is already a process in place that allows the elected representatives that represent entities that need or have water to facilitate any transfers that are in their interests. Federal and state law provide a means of transfer, and the means that's currently in place provides much greater consideration and protection of the various community interests of those involved that may be either receiving or transferring water to make sure that their interests are considered. The current law also provides the ability to form water augmentation authorities or water authorities. One such authority already exists in Pinal County, and there's already a way for that to happen. There are several reasons that 2338, as it's been proposed, is a very onerous proposal, a very onerous bill. It's only required, it can be one or more, or two or more entities, and only one of which must be a public entity. And consequently, the authorities that are formed could be dominated and controlled by private interests. And once formed, as the bill is written, the entities forming the authority each provide a director to run that. It would have no elected board that actually represented the electorate of the communities where it has activity. It has no, as such, it has no accountability to affected communities, to the residents of those communities, the merchants of those communities, the schools or local governments that may be affected by the transfer or acquisition of water. Another thing of concern is that any water authority should be totally accountable to the voters in areas where they represent. And as proposed, 2338 not only has no accountability to the voters, by the very wording of the bill, it's expressly exempted from oversight by the Arizona Corporation Commission. So it's even more distant from oversight.
You have about 30 more seconds.
Okay. The other issues, the powers of eminent domain are too broad and actually don't need to be there to give eminent domain powers to an entity that may be privately controlled is very concerning. Also, it appropriates $30 million from the general fund as seed money at a time when areas of education, highway maintenance, and other critical needs are underfunded, and the rainy day fund remains depleted, and it would still be pulling money away from there. As a final word, the definition of the term augmentation should involve finding and putting to use currently unused water. It should not involve seeking to obtain water that's being used by others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Bobby McDermott and Mike Ivers is next.
I would like to thank the committee for coming. I see many friendly faces who I've met before and my good friend Herb, so thank you so much for coming to listen to us. I spent 38 years working in soil and water conservation in the Yuma area, in the Yuma County and Bard. Yuma is the most efficient surface irrigated area in the world, and our farmers have put in millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure and changed their farming practices and learned to be more efficient over the years. So it would be wrong to penalize us because we save water, and that is one of the great concerns there always is. If we save water, somebody wants to take it away from us rather than allowing us to expand other industries that may need that water. I'm very concerned, as is brought up already, about the trickle-down effects. You look at what happened to the automotive industry in Detroit and other things, what happened to the infrastructure, the towns, the people. They've never recovered. Go to the south and the mills and things that have gone away. You know, you destroy a community, The fallowing, which was brought up, is a community destroyer because it assumes that after one person has received their money for whatever they've given up, the rest of the community will then provide them all the goods and services when they want to come back into business. And that just, to me, seems very wrong. This is a community problem. A lot of folks look at the water issues as strictly having to do with agriculture, but this affects San Luis, Yuma, Somerton, Winter Haven, Bard. This is a people problem. This is something that every individual needs to be involved in, and we need to have direction from our agricultural community and the leaders in Yuma as to how the rest of us can support their efforts, and so they don't have to bear this burden by themselves. I'm sure the car dealers selling $3 million worth of white trucks a year, so you can't tell who's who, would love to assist keeping this industry healthy. As I sat in the audience, I looked behind you, and if you'll look at the seal of Yuma, you see the two primary factors are the Colorado and the Gila River on that seal. Now, Randy Hoff in the paper 2 days ago, and I'll paraphrase, it doesn't make any difference how many winter visitors come through on a yearly basis and how much money they spend, or how efficient or large our two military installations become. Yuma is an agricultural town. When our agricultural industry suffers, the community suffers, and if it goes away, we just become another wind-blown desert spot. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Ivers. I'm the President and CEO of the Yuma Community Food Bank. I'm also on the Board of Directors of the Arizona Association of Food Banks, an elected member of the National Advisory Council for Feeding America. The Yuma Community Food Bank's been here since 1978. I've been the CEO for the last year and a half. I have never, ever in my life experienced such incredible generosity from a community in my life for the poor and for the hungry. And we are at war on hunger in Yuma. We're a military community. In the last year and a half, we served over 5,500 veterans. The average food insecurity rate in Arizona for children is 29%. In Yuma, it's 42.9%. We have a 30.3% unemployment rate, the highest in the United States of America. The Yuma Community Food Bank is not an entitlement program. It is a safety net. Less than 10% of our funding comes from the government. Where does it come from? The ag community, the people who utilize this water in this community. And they're doing a tremendous job. We wouldn't be open if it wasn't for them. In 2010, 2011, we served 10,000 people a month. Now we are serving 22 to 26,000 people a month. In Mohawk Valley yesterday, an 8-year-old, I said, what are you going to do when you don't have school and food this summer? How are you going to get food? He says, it's going to be complicated. That's an 8-year-old. It's a serious, serious issue. It's important to know that we serve Yuma and La Paz County, 10,000 square miles, 16 agencies, 13 distribution sites, the McMullen Valley Food Bank, Quartzsite, and Parker. The point I want to make is the agricultural community here isn't just serving Yuma. Since 2008, the ag community in Yuma has donated 832 truckloads of donated produce to the rest of Arizona and the United States. That does not include the 30 million pounds of produce it's distributed to the hungry in Yuma. Please remember that when you're trying to legislate here, that this community, the ag community here, is incredibly generous to the entire state of Arizona and the United States. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Dennis Booth, you're next. And Julie Jensen is next after that.
Honorable representatives and guests, thanks for coming to Yuma to talk to us today. I'm standing up because I'm a businessman in Yuma. I have about 45 employees and a payroll of several $1 million. And I'm just saying, it's not just farmers here that are talking to you today. Our lifeblood in this community is based on agriculture. And I really would like to have you consider the impact of taking and setting up an independent organization without reach from elected officials. That's what concerns us the most. And I would assume that most of you may not be totally happy with an independent redistricting commission. Independence sometimes means things we don't like to have happen long-term. The entire Yuma town needs this water. Yes, we need it to irrigate our crops, but also, you know, someday Intel might want to build a facility in Yuma. You don't know. So really what you say is if you don't manage wisely the water resources of a particular area, you sacrifice its long-term 100-year plan to the needs of other communities who have not been willing to research other opportunities. So my main driver today is let's try to keep this. We have a particular situation where we can make these kind of transfers now. It maybe take a little bit of work, but I don't think we want anything to be simple, because this is a major impact on everybody's economic outcome, no matter which community is affected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Julie? And Daniel Sanchez is on deck.
Okay, thanks very much again for coming and for creating this forum. You can see that you guys have certainly created a firestorm here in Yuma. And we've heard a lot about the aggregate economic impact of it. So I'll spend my 3 minutes to try to explain one of the building blocks, one of the pieces of that, of the economics that you see there. And maybe
Just speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
maybe help you understand why we're so emotionally and financially driven to protect these federal water rights that are really the bedrock of everything that we have here. So the emotional part, personally, I can tell you, in my family, started about a little more than 100 years ago when my great-grandfather physically worked on the water project to build what we have now. And then, and that created a lot of the sense of caring community that you heard Mike Ivers talk so passionately about, that it's something that you don't really tamper with us in Yuma, because we're incredibly connected in bonds that go way back. And then to fast forward and more on the financial side, about a little more than 50 years ago, my father started on the ag input side, a business. Dennis talked about farm equipment. We talk about other kinds of technology that's so important to agriculture, and chemicals and fertilizers. And that is still something that we enjoy very much the support of this community for. But we've also, by having a community here that was vibrant enough to attract knowledge workers from around the world, we have about 700 people now working for us, about 750, not all in Yuma, about 300 people working at a plant here in Yuma that is completely dependent, of course. It's not a heavy water user, but it formulates chemicals and exports most of those for big companies. We formulate them for Latin America. We have the rest, the people who are more the scientists and other types of knowledge workers are about, we sell about 500 million, a little more than 500 million in revenues, and only about 5% of that is actually sold in our businesses that are operating locally. So the rest of that is all based on the vibrancy of the community. The reason those kind of people chose to move to Yuma is because of the vibrancy that comes. They're people who like agriculture. We'd like to be able to have that kind of a worldwide company in a city where people can actually see what they're making products for. Most of our competition is in places like Philadelphia, and I think that they suffer from that. We suffer from things, it's a little harder to get to Washington, D.C. from here. So certainly there is a lot more at stake than what you might see. It's not just a few people that would be impacted, and those federal water, the strong legal federal basis we have is something that is absolutely critical to all of that, and something that's really beneficial to the whole state. So it's really imperative that we not sacrifice any of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel? Rodney Williams will be next.
Good morning, representatives. Thank you for coming out, and I know you're taking the beating. It's not directed towards you. Thank you for the opportunity. I know that your goal is to look out for the state as a whole, and my hope is that these comments are shown to the state legislature, to those representatives. Therefore, I'm going to reiterate something that's already been said. There's no need for another layer of bureaucracy. As community elected officials know their needs more than appointed officials, which is the very reason they were elected. I I want to remind you of the danger of organizations without elected officials. Look at the IRS right now, what's happening with them. Look at the Fed. The Fed is not a public organization. It's private banks and individuals with their quantitative easing, which if you know fiscal side economics, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's the danger of having unelected officials in charge of things that impact communities and really the nation. Whenever the good of the whole is the concern, there are always those in the minority who pay a high price, as can be seen really most easily through our tax structure. The authority should be composed of a majority of members. If we decide to go through with this, which again we shouldn't, but if we decide to do it anyway and not to listen to the communities as they're asking to not do this, then consider making these authorities composed of a majority of members from the community whose water is being sought. So that way, those communities who are being bought, they have a majority voice because they should. Because if you're taking from them, they should be the ones who are saying yes or no. And these individuals who are on the authorities, again, should be those elected officials because they know their communities much better than appointed officials. Prior to any action for transfers, these communities who are asking, who are seeking these water transfers, and we should call them transfers, we should stop calling them augmentations, these nice euphemisms to hide what we're really trying to do. So I hate people pretending for the good that those communities must implement at the public, private, and commercial levels conservation efforts determined by the communities who are leading in such efforts, such as Yuma County. We are leading not just in water, but look at our solar projects that are going on here. We are trying to lead not just the state of Arizona, but the entire nation. And people should start understanding that Yuma has an impact worldwide. And if they want to know how to do it, then we're more than willing to share with them. And before anything is ever considered of transferring money, again, we should call it what it is, then they should come and implement at least the very level strategies that we're implementing. Otherwise, they shouldn't even have a voice to come and ask for transfers. I just want to let you know that I'm just here as a member of the community. I've only been here for 7 years. I was stationed here in 2006. And I love Yuma so much, I decided to try to actually become an elected official as a member of the city council, hoping I can serve this community. Whether I get elected or not, I'm never going to stop fighting for Yuma County, and I'll never allow a majority to take the rights of minority just because they can't do what's necessary to support themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Rodney Williams, Wade Noble. Oh, I'm sorry, Wade, you're not next. Shelley Tunis will be next.
Hi, I'm Rod Williams. I live at 2790 West Julie Lane here in the county in Yuma. I farm in Imperial Valley and on the East Mesa in California. I did not prepare a speech. I got a call at 10 o'clock this morning, or at 9 o'clock this morning from my daughter, who is a nurse practitioner here at Prime Care. Said, Dad, I want you to look at some papers that are on my desk. This is a document for our area. They're going to shut our water off 16th day of this month. This is critical. I happen to be one of the guys that, I'm sorry, I had a stroke back in October. I couldn't speak. Maybe this is the reason I got well. This is my first public speaking since that time. I farm in the Imperial Valley. I have land leased from the Imperial Irrigation District, which had been out of production for many years. I cleared it 3 years ago for the Imperial Irrigation District. I'm losing that ground the end of this month. It's all going to fouling. I'm glad for this meeting, for this opportunity. We are a complacent, reactive society. When I was in the 5th grade, I happened to be in a classroom that had the first interactive television in the United States. A professor from Purdue University came on one day and he gave a chart that showed a water system in the western United States that was replenished It was the Colorado River system. At that time, I was not aware of that. It also showed a large diversion system across the Midwestern United States from the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi. And he said, sometime in your lives, you're going to see the need for this because you're not going to have drinking water. As I was in Phoenix 2 days ago and bought a bottle of water for $2.45 because I was thirsty, I realized what he was saying was true. Very few people, I've studied water for the last 10 years. I've made presentations to the IID. They've got the most antiquated irrigation system in the nation. Needs to be improved. I happen to be at the end of the runs where when the ditch rider comes out, and they call them Zanderos, they say, hey, we got extra water, we got to get rid of it. There it goes, boom. Last year was 300,000 acre feet. And I've got the documents right here. I go to all the board meetings. I've tried my best. I've met with many people. I've actually picked up Bill Hazenkamp from Metropolitan Water right here at the Millionaire Airport, taking him out to show him places to generate storage areas when the IID had 500,000 acre feet over or under use. I have reports that I've helped pay for. That's Kleinfelder study done at the East Mesa. We're sitting on the largest untapped groundwater aquifer in the continental United States, and nobody's doing anything about it. These kind of meetings and getting these many people here are going to bring this to a head. Because without cohesiveness with the legislative bodies and get your butts to Washington and get a project to replenish the Colorado River system, that's what it's going to take. There's 25 million people over that hill, and all the millions that are here, there's more population expansion occurring every day, and the river is dry. I know ways to, and have presented many ways, to replenish some of the usage that's there. You know, we go into meetings and there's 285,000 acre foot that the IID needs to pay back for the last 2 years. Well, I think it's a technical accounting error since they brought the Brock Reservoir on. Because I happen to farm there and I watched the flow of water go through there. The MWD is getting credit for, San Diego's got a piece, Southern Nevada's got a piece. You know, these are accounting problems that most people that don't have common sense don't realize. But in this particular, I haven't followed your legislation in Arizona like I should have, but it's all a root of a simple problem. It's quality and quantity. Without the quantity and without the quality, we're all going to be thirsty one day. And I came from the Midwest. I was in the grain harvesting business for 40 years. I traveled all over the western United States. I understand water. I used to, 17 years old, I was putting pumps in the ground and developing wells in the Midwest. Watched the state of Kansas go from unlimited water use to 2 acre feet per year. Mine one of the most valuable underground water resources in the world that's now going dry. This is a federal problem. And if you don't get the farmers and get the states to align and get to Washington, you're going to continue having problems. And I don't know what to tell you, but I'd be happy to help you. I work for no one but myself.
We have about 30 seconds if you could wrap it up.
Right there is a groundwater availability study done by the most brilliant people in the nation for the Salton Sea Basin. And it includes this area, 3 billion acre feet. Granted, you may have to treat some of it. But this study on the East Mesa that I did 3 years ago in conjunction with ORMAT shows that it's #1 quality drinking water, 50 feet deep. Okay? The government's got wells all over there. They just drive out and monitor them every year. Okay? So that's the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley Tunis. And Anna Marie, you're next. Good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Shelley Tunis, and I'm an attorney. I represent the Yuma Fresh Vegetable Association. We appreciate the committee coming down here today. It's a very important issue, as you can see. We also have to acknowledge The Colorado River is overallocated. There is a problem not only in Arizona, but with the basin states on the Colorado River. So this is only going to get worse with drought situations, and we have those far too often than we have more water to spare. I want to make 3 points today, and one is about conservation. Before any water transfers occur, there has to be measurable conservation efforts from those people, those areas seeking the water transfers. It has to be measurable. It has to be written in the legislation that they have made conservation efforts. It can be a list of conservation efforts in the legislation. It can be a percentage, but that has to be a part of the legislation as it goes forward. I realize conservation efforts cost money. So do water transfers. So if you need to fund the conservation efforts too, put that in the legislation, not just funding mechanisms for water transfers. Secondly, water transfers don't necessarily need to involve transfer of water rights. There was a conference, outstanding conference here on May 2nd by the Arizonans for Common Sense, and there we heard about from the California Palo Verde Irrigation District and their fallowing experience. And what we learned, they are in Imperial and Riverside counties on the western side of the Colorado River. What we learned is that experience is not perfect, but we can learn from it in Arizona. And they do not transfer water rights, they transfer water. And there's a significant difference there. We think that programs should be thoroughly evaluated, see what might benefit Arizona, what won't work in Arizona, and again, look at the transfer of water, look at water transfers and not necessarily water rights. The third point I want to make is on the impact on the local economy. And again, any process that permits water transfers has an impact on the local community, as has been pointed out. But you can include an evaluation of the impact on the local community. And again, put that in the legislation. We will evaluate the impact on the local community, the economic impact, and pay for it. If you're going to pay for water transfers, pay for the impact on the local community. That should be a part of the legislation. So again, we're not just looking at paying for infrastructure to transfer that water. We're looking at funding mechanisms for conservation efforts and for the impact on the local community. Evaluate it, put it in the legislation. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Marie and Phil Townsend will be next.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. As you can see, Yuma is very passionate about this issue, and I'm not going to consume your time rehashing the very pertinent points that have been made here today. And again, they've all been right on fact about the issues with this bill and what it means to Yuma. But rather, I'd like to appeal to you to take these concerns very seriously. And while it may not have been or be the intent of the proponents of this bill for the consequences that we're talking about, these things could happen. And so I'm not questioning the intent of the proponents, but I'm saying that we need to look at this bill very seriously, and if it is ever to go forward, take all of these concerns and make sure they are addressed sufficiently before any legislation is ever presented. Because this means the lifeblood to Yuma. It means all of the people standing in this room and their businesses and their children. And we need to make sure that we cover our bases before we proceed with anything. And again, augmentation should never include taking from one to give to another. We need to learn from our neighbors to the west and the mistakes they've made. and never allow augmentation to include taking from one person in the state to give to another. I just don't think that that is how Arizona has ever done policy. We've always kept everything at a statewide perspective and made sure that it's fair and reasonable, and that rights are protected, and that property rights are protected, that property values are protected. And I think that we need to make sure that happens under this bill before anything could ever go forward. With that, I will accept questions if you have any.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, Stephanie Day is up next.
Chairman Barton, members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. We appreciate you holding this meeting in Yuma and allowing us to have our input for your consideration. My name's Phil Townsend, and I'm a fourth-generation Yuman. My great-grandparents on both sides of my family came to Yuma as school teachers and homesteaded here. I still live on one of the family farms. My wife and I own and operate an independent agricultural chemical company, and both of our children work in the family business. We are totally dependent on a thriving farming industry here in Yuma for our livelihood. But I'm also a proud Arizonan. I love our state. I have great memories of church camp in Prescott, camping and fishing in the White Mountains. I have family living in Flagstaff, Tucson, Payson, and Alpine. And I know they have issues concerning sufficient water for their communities. The answer to those water problems do not lie with legislation that creates new bureaucracies with sweeping powers of eminent domain and bonding authorities. Solutions can be found by bringing people together, the great people of Arizona, and finding creative ways to augment water sources. If transfers of water do need to occur, there is a process already in place that works very well. It uses local governments already in place, which are accountable and protect the rights of the communities. This process has been successfully used in the past to fulfill settlements with the Indian nations. Yuma has some great people who intimately understand water issues and water law. They should be at the table from the beginning of every conversation and discussion concerning water in Arizona, especially Colorado River waters. As Arizonans, we all care about the well-being of our state. New authorities and bureaucracies are not the answer. Backroom deals are not the answer. Together, as Arizonans, we can find the solutions to these problems, but Yuma must be at the table from the beginning of all these discussions. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Is Stephanie Day here? And then Ginger Jane Hammock.
Hello. I'm just live in Yuma. We've farmed here for over 100 years. We've got our property leased out now, but we're still dependent on the water rights here. We've got excellent irrigation districts that really manage and maintain our water. We don't waste water down here. The problem I have is once somebody sells their water rights, you don't get those back. So then you're dependent on another community to say, hey, we've got a little extra. We know you screwed up by selling those. We'll charge you double what you'd pay. Right now, water is gold. You're not going to be using gold in the future to buy things with. It's going to be water and food. If you don't have the water, you're not going to have the food. And I just hope that they take a look at this and don't. I hate to see somebody in Yuma sell their water rights to Phoenix, Scottsdale, one of these big areas. It's lost to us then. I'd rather have our irrigation districts work with the state community. If we've got extra water, we can surely help other communities out. And I think that's what we've done all since we've become a state. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Mutharts will be next.
Hi, my name is Ginger Jane Hammock, and I thank each one of you for being here today. One of the things I was thinking about while the other people were speaking, and so eloquently, I enjoyed everyone's points so far, is that you're here today, and you're not just doing a job. I want to encourage and inspire each and every one of you to leave here today feeling completely inspired that you have an amazing opportunity right now to leave your legacy. You have a legacy to leave and a duty for our future. When I read the headlines this morning about this meeting, I gave great thought to the fact that in 47 years, we have a potential crisis that is completely unimaginable. We have too many people out here watching TV and not paying attention to what is going to transpire in our world. Homeowners, my God, can you imagine the threats to the homeowners out here and to the future of our country? Unemployment at 30% here. I say we drill into that aquifer, we get in there, we tap into it, and how many jobs will be created? Let's create some jobs out here. You guys have a duty on this HB 2338, which I feel will only oppress the people and sacrifice our liberties and freedoms, our constitutional rights, the right to pursue happiness. We have a duty to our children. I cannot stress that enough. We have a duty to the future of not just our country, but humanity. Water is our most vital resource. Your legacy can be left. You can go out there to Washington and fight for the people. We don't need to create more laws. We need to implement the laws that already exist. We need to be vigilant. I challenge each one of you to leave here today. No to HB 2338. Yes to the humanity and future. Yes to the aquifer. Yes. I see a lot of laziness out here. I see a lot of people that don't know what the heck is going on, and it scares the heck out of me. This is not a game, and I've been saying this for a while. This is not a game. This is humanity at stake. This is hunger, poverty. Leave your legacy, people. God bless you.
Thank you. Paul and David Sharp's up next.
My name is Paul Muthart. I'm general manager at Pasquinelli Produce. Pasquinelli farms 9,000 acres in the Yuma area. I'm also a member of Arizona Common Sense. And I would like to thank the committee for being here to listen to our testimony. Every day it seems we hear about new laws and new regulations, adding to an already mountain of rules and regulations that business and people have to live by. And I admit that there are going to be some times and circumstances where new laws are necessary. In the case of HB 2338, I'm not sure that this is the case. I'm in a very steep learning curve personally about the intricacies and complications of dealing with water in Arizona, and in particular water from the Colorado River. What I think I've learned is that there are already laws and regulations in place at the federal, state, and county levels to allow for the possibility of the transfer of water rights. So my encouragement to you is to determine for yourselves if what I just said is true. If not, then determine what part of the existing laws need to be changed. This is the document that was introduced earlier to kick off this meeting and is the genesis of HB 2338. When I look through the document, I don't see the compelling argument that says this regulation that we have is wrong, this law that we have is wrong, this code section needs to be modified. So I'm not talking about changing existing laws or introducing new law to serve the needs of a select group of people in Arizona, but rather enacting and changing laws that are really can be universally accepted by all of Arizona. One other thing that I've learned in the short time I've been studying this is that it's very hard to not impact one part of the state by dealing with water in a different part of the state. So please consider very carefully whether we need new laws and new regulations to supplant or increase the existing laws that we have already. Thank you.
Thank you. David Sharp and Vicki Scott will be next.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing us to come and speak to you today. Chairman Barton, I again would like to thank you for your position that you've taken on House Bill 2338. I know that that was a strong stance that you took during the session. We appreciate your committee and what you did there. Reemphasize a lot of the things that have already been said today. Very, very clear, very, very concise. We already have statutes and provisions to allow for water movement, for taking care of things. I think what the key issue is that's being looked at is the days of cheap water are over. Days of cheap fuel are over. We paid greatly for our fuel today. As we go forward, water is going to be more expensive. It's going to cost more to get to where we need to be. We looked for the definition of augmentation. We still have not defined that. Many of us have suggested today that that's looking for new water, not moving water from one area to another. Does that mean building more reservoirs? Not a popular thing, but it is needed when those years when we have excessive flows. Conservation, that's been discussed. Cloud seeding, there's other provisions that we may need to look at. Again, let's remember that we already have enough statutes, enough provisions to cover this, and if we need something more, I think we're doing the right thing today to sit down and discuss this as in the manner that we are. And we just appreciate you coming here, and I will not take any more time because it's been said very well already. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vicki Scott. And Diane Ewing will be next.
Esteemed elected officials, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment today. I applaud the authors of House Bill 2338 for their willingness to tackle a very complex issue. But I can't discern the full vision of what the authors of the bill thought the application of it might look like. What I see in writing is legislation that allows the robbery of Peter to pay Paul and gives the robber the ability to borrow the money to execute the theft. As Arizonans, we cannot continue to allow water-deficient areas of our state to believe that water will be available from agriculture or from rural and undeveloped Arizona. The reality is there may be no water to take. If we are indeed serious about our water future, we need to go big or go thirsty. What we need is legislation that clearly calls for true augmentation, the identification of new sources of real wet water, and also supports the development of previously untapped resources. Let's create legislation that favors and rewards innovation in conservation, reclamation, and reuse while protecting our unique Arizona environments. Let's stop relying on transfers. We need to protect current sources and future resources from being siphoned off by entities that haven't taken steps to provide for themselves. Let's not sell, broker, or paper trade the buckets of water that we create with our future legislation outside of Arizona. Please, any legislation that you strive to develop must contribute to an overarching water policy long-term for Arizona and not just provide for a limited few in the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diane Ewing. And it looks like Therese George will be next.
First, I want to say I'm very humbled by the people of Yuma and those of you on the board who have connections here to take this much interest and take this much education forward. I want to bring forward Webster's definition of treason is the handing over, the betraying of trust, and the giving of aid and comfort to the enemy. Yuma is special in that its agriculture not only feeds this nation, but does feed other nations. If we are to lose the agriculture here in Yuma and in California, which we've lost some already, we are threatening the sovereignty of this nation. If we are going to export this industry, as we have with the electronic industry, and it's going to be the accounting industry, and the lawyer industry, and the medical industry, if we give our food and our water over to the enemy, and who better than China to do it cheaper than we can, then we've lost our country, and it truly is treason. I look at the country, but I'm loving these people. My husband's family's been here since the 1850s. I have not. But I can appreciate the love and the care and the true liberty of the people here and their fight for freedom. And I want you to consider that, because once we lose our food and water resources to this wonderful country, we don't want a one-world government. We don't want the UN coming in and saying, well, you're going to be doing this and you're going to be doing that for the good of those who have not worked for it. These people have worked for it. This country has worked for it. Keep the power where it belongs, where people will fight for it and will cherish it. And I thank you very much, every one of you that showed up today.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a, oh, right here, okay. And P.A. Birdie, I believe, if that's correct, would be next.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you
Thanks.
for coming. Most of my thoughts have been articulated, and very well. I have only one thing that I'd like to add. When I researched 2338, it disturbed me a little to see that some of the strongest proponents had already signed on to ICLEI. That is Agenda 21, and ICLEI's goal, one of their goals, is to eliminate agriculture, to eliminate irrigation, to eliminate private property. Those are all considered unsustainable. That would eliminate us. And many of the proponents, the two of those proponents that are pushing 2338 include the Rose Law Firm, that's Hillary Clinton, Dennis DeConcini. They are both counsels to Monsanto, and Monsanto is interested in this because Monsanto is very interested in privatizing water. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And William Gresser will be next.
My name is Burdick. Most people call me Doc. I got my honorable discharge in 1945, Treasure Island. I came down to Yuma, and the man that was managing the Greyhound station here, Harry Erickson, said, well, why don't you settle here in Yuma? And I've been here ever since. But I remember in 1945 when we had 45,000 cubic feet per second going down the Colorado River, sometimes more when they were flushing the gates at Laguna Dam. But right now we just have a very limited amount of water. And by the way, I'm at Post Office Box 333 if someone wants to write to me. And my phone number is 488-0049. But I have a little video camera over here that's recording this program. Some of you may want to get a copy of what went on today. You get that. You'll be able to get it later at the Heritage and at the main library. But a lot of people in this audience, I don't think realize the importance of technology here, and they don't realize that, for example, in Tijuana, Mexico, right now, you turn the faucet on and you're getting some Yuma, you're getting some Colorado River water, because the water is pumped from Mexicali over the Laguna Mountains down to Tijuana. And we need to think way ahead and think about the fact that regardless of how careful we are with what little water we get from the Colorado River, we're going to need more water than that, and the answer is to get water from Oregon, Washington, and there are plans, the LaRouche plan. Some of you may want to read up on that a little bit. It's very possible and will be necessary because we just cannot get enough water from the Colorado River to satisfy not only this area, but especially the area down below us in Sonoran. And under the LaRouche system of canals, we would have water also clear down to Hermosillo. And it's something we need to be working on right now, getting money. And we have tremendous types of, we have right here in Arizona, in our copper industry, we have huge tractors, huge trucks. We have technology, and what wasn't practical 20 years ago can be practical right now. And yes, we need at this time to be sure and not lose any of our rights here, but we also need to be thinking about the future. And I would suggest that sometime you go to the library, sometime within the next couple of days, I will have a DVD that shows maps of the proposed waterways that would bring water not only to Yuma, but to the Sonoran Desert. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to Yuma to hear about how we see the water situation. Everyone thanks you for being here. I want to tell you that I'm a little bit upset with you because I own a restaurant in town and half of my customers are in this room and it's lunchtime, so y'all are costing me a lot of money. If you start the next meeting down here about 7:30 in the morning, I'd be very happy. I don't serve breakfast. I was in Canada. I was in Halifax, Nova Scotia a couple of years ago, and I looked up on the shelf and there was a head of lettuce from Yuma, Arizona. When you go home tonight and you open up that package of imported spaghetti you got from Italy, just remember that the durum wheat that made that spaghetti was grown here in Yuma. We have a tremendous impact on this entire nation. And I, being a restaurateur, want to talk to you from a little bit different perspective, because I don't own any water rights. I'm not a farmer. I'm just happy when I turn on the tap and something comes out. I want to talk to you about food safety. As we take more and more of our food products and put them overseas and ship them out to various countries, we cannot be sure of the efficacy, the safety of those products. When I open up a case of lettuce that I get from U.S. Foods or Cisco or Shamrock, I know that that seed was planted, that it was grown, it was harvested, it was picked, packed, and shipped according to standards in the United States. And I would say that as we take water from an essential use in this community to a possible use in some other community, and we start moving agriculture out of this community, we're putting this entire nation at risk. I'd ask you to take a look at some of the things. We are all, unfortunately, victims of the computer these days. I was looking at some YouTube videos of shrimp farming. Next time you order shrimp and it says farm-raised shrimp, check where that farm was. This farm was in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta. It was about a half a mile downstream from probably a 20-inch pipe that had raw sewage dumping into the river. Boats going up and down with diesel and gasoline. Just filth, absolute filth. That's what we're going to do. If we start shutting down the agricultural community and move more of those things overseas where we don't have the same standards. We have growers who grow in other countries, but they grow according to our standards. When we ship them out, and China's been mentioned, you don't know what's coming back. So I just tell you that water is the lifeblood of any community. Take it from here. We not only shut down agriculture, we shut down any possible future expansion, any future development. So this is the lifeblood of the community. And I'll leave you with one final thought. If you can take it from here, pretty soon somebody's going to take it from you. And when they finish taking it from you, the other states will be taking it from all of us. I would say, don't put that chink in the armor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dave Sellers. And then Robbie Woodhouse will be next.
Good morning. I feel kind of bad. I don't have 3 minutes worth of material here, so I'll be brief. My name is Dave Sellers. My company is Sellers Petroleum. We have been marketing petroleum products since 1954. We currently employ 42 employees, 3 of which are my sons. The agricultural business in this community represents over 70% of my entire business. So this is very important to me in my livelihood and providing these 42 jobs. If farm ground is fallowed and the rights are transferred, 42 jobs could be in jeopardy of being lost. So I am here today to ask you if, when you're at the negotiating table, to please let Yuma be represented. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Robbie Woodhouse and then Chad Pearson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my old friend Herb Gunther. Thank you all for being down here and giving us a chance to share with you our thoughts and feelings on House Bill 2338. And I would like to also thank you, Chairwoman Barton, for your stand that you took in holding this bill in your committee hearing that day and allowing this process to take place. And thanks to Speaker Tobin for forming the committee and having you all go around the state and do what you're doing and listen to the citizens and hopefully take that back. Mr. Chairman, I've changed what I wanted to tell you several times today because some of the speakers before me have eloquently stated the points that I wanted to make too, and I think you can see the passion in all of us that have spoken to you this morning about that. House Bill 2338, I believe, was a bad piece of legislation, and thanks again to Representative Barton for holding it in committee. I want to tell you a little bit about the fear factor of what arose in all of us here in Yuma County about that. A friend of mine, when I'd served 5 years on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission, I also sit on the Welton Mohawk Irrigation and Drainage District Board of Directors, asked me one day at a commission meeting, did my board at Welton Mohawk and other irrigation district boards in Yuma County understand that the crosshairs were on the irrigation districts in Yuma County because of their water? And he was referring to the fact that other areas of the state, as we're talking about with House Bill 2338, are in dire need of water. This was several years ago, before anyone, I believe, even thought about the WRDC or any of this thing that has transpired in the last few years. So when House Bill 2338 arose, somewhat on a fast track, it popped up, as you all know, as it was dropped at the legislature and got to the committee. I mean, it was moving along very, very rapidly. It's a very slippery slope to most of us here in Yuma, and that's why we got up on our hind legs and came to Phoenix and testified and began doing the things that we did. It really strikes, we believe, at what could be a death blow to a lot of what we do here in Yuma County. And I think that's a real important thing to think about. If water were to leave here or anywhere else that has water rights in the state of Arizona, to go to places that are already in shortage, is it okay, in my simplistic way of looking at it, to murder a viable community someplace by taking its water, its lifeblood, to sustain another one, I just cannot be comfortable with that at all. And I want to talk a little bit more about the current process. When I served on the Game and Fish Commission those 5 years, I was at the legislature several times. I talked to Representative Pratt a few times. I was with you a few times, Representative Barton, and of course, Representative Mitchell and Otondo. You're new, and I was off the commission by the time you were there. A lot of the time that we were at the legislature talking to senators and representatives, local control was always a term that popped up. And I believe that everyone in the legislature would agree that it's better for issues to be decided, if they can be, at local levels with local elected officials and without the need of other legislations. And I would submit to you that the process that's in place right now for potential water transfers is exactly that. I think back to the Constitution of the United States and the brilliance of those people back in the 1700s, how they wrote that Constitution and how it is still such a viable document today. Well, I look back also at water transfer rules when they were written and put into place, and I think there was the same kind of brilliance that came up when those regulations and rules that are in place. It starts, in my instance, if someone was in the Welton Mohawk Valley and they wanted to transfer water out of our area, 9 of us sit on that board. It's got to come to that board for the first hurdle to get across, if you want to call it that, for a transfer. The 9 of us on that board are going to look at all the different things that would affect our area, not just the Welton Mohawk Valley, but the whole of Yuma County. What would it do to the infrastructure of our local schools? What would it do to the infrastructure of our irrigation district? It wouldn't sell as much water, so how would it be able to operate? What would it do to the tax base of Yuma County? It goes on and on and on, and also the ancillary businesses that some of those businessmen have spoken here today. So it's left to local control to do that. And I want to just give you a brief little history. Several of us that have spoken this morning have mentioned that we're multi-generational families in the Yuma County area. I am one of those. I'm a 3rd-generation farmer. I have my son working on the farm that's a 4th-generation farmer. And in my family, we go way back. When my grandfather left Fullerton, California in the mid-1920s in a Model T Ford with his son, my dad, 2 years old, in the back of it, the man that he worked for there said, "Woodhouse, when you go to Arizona and you go broke, and you'll always have a job to come back here." And he said, you'll probably not have gas money, the mules will be pulling your old car back. My grandfather told him, you'll never see me again. He went to roll, he started clearing an acre or 2 a year with those mules, and he never did go back. My dad didn't go back. I'm there, and my son's there. You know, we want to work with the legislature. We do not want to be adversarial. But this whole area, this whole county, has never hesitated when they need to draw a line in the sand and say, no, you're not going to cross that sand. So I would hope that when you guys come with your final findings, it's okay for a bill to die. It's okay for 2338 to go in the paper shredder. And I do not believe we need a new bill to replace 2338. I believe we should just use the water transfer rules that are in place and let local control prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ed Pearson. And then Lorna Brooks will be next.
I also would like to thank the committee members for making it down here to Yuma and also for the political backlash that some of you have enjoyed by standing in the way of this HB 2338. Probably one of the worst things just happened. I followed a very strong speaker, so this time I'd like to donate my time to Russ Clark to come up here and take the rest of my 3 minutes. This whole room is filled with people from the community, and the Yuma community is an agriculture community. Like many people before me, multi-generational, 4 generations on both sides of my family. And some people ask me, well, what do you do now? Well, I'm the general sales manager at the Bill Alexander Ford Lincoln store. And I can assure you that over 60% of our business is, as Bobby said earlier, driving around in those white trucks out there. I can't even think about the indirect effect this would have to our business. And people often have asked me, well, Chad, why don't you go to that farm and why don't you take advantage of your family heritage and whatnot? And They obviously have never been on a farm. But now we have the boogeyman looking at us, and they're trying to get something going through the legislature, through, as Phil would say, the backdoor areas. It's scary enough to be up against people who have more votes than you. But when there's no votes, that's just not good. And as far as the agriculture community is concerned, if you ever go onto the farm, not only do you have to worry about weather conditions and pests and markets, and hope to God we don't go to war to somebody so you can't ship your product to them that might need it for whatever political reasons. But now we have to worry about our own people that don't manage their water or their finite resources properly and trying to come down here and just take it away from us. So thank you again, and I'm sure you'll do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Lorna, and then Julie Engel next.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm going to start with a little history. In 1849, the first ferry was established at Yuma. Yuma is one of the oldest towns in the state. People began to settle here, and following the example of the Quetzal Indians, the villagers of Yuma began planting corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, and they relied on the overflow of the river to water their crops. Well, that wasn't very good. It wasn't very reliable. So in 1898, a civil engineer here by the name of J.E. Luddy built a canal. He started the Irrigation Land and Improvement Company. So people here have been taking things into their own hands for well over 100 years, building canals, getting the irrigation done, doing it as well as they could. Many improvements and inventions and all came out of Yuma County. And along with it came the towns of Somerton, Gadsden, San Luis, Winter Haven, Bard, Roll, Welton, Tacna, along with Yuma. We all rely on the agriculture. We all rely on the Colorado River and the Gila River. Those rivers are the reason for our existence. That water is important. It's crucial to us. The farming is crucial to us. And this isn't about building houses. This is about feeding a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Julie Engel and Russ Jones next.
Good morning, mid-afternoon. Madam Barton, thank you very much for everything you've done. Chairman, thank you for coming, and I appreciate all of you being here. It is a great privilege and a great responsibility in the capacity of President and CEO of Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation, which I represent today. Our members or our investors are the Yuma County, City of Yuma, City of San Luis, City of Somerton, Town of Welton, and 120-plus private sector business people who want to protect and grow this economy. A lot of what I'm going to say has been said, but I'm bringing it to you from an economic perspective. We are the keeper of the economy, and agriculture, of course, is king. As been said, the need for legislation does not exist. New legislation is not necessary. The federal government forcing states into policy is what all of you, as state representatives, oppose and resent. And that this legislation is doing just that. You are forcing regulation and policy onto the local level. The water districts are local government in its purest form, and I stole that line from Robbie Woodhouse. I was in a meeting with Robbie, and he said that, and it really struck home with me. This is the purest form of government. This is what the Founding Fathers wanted, was at the local level. However, if this ad hoc committee decides it is prudent to form a new authority with the passage of legislation, Yuma County is the most costly water you can target within the state of Arizona. And let me explain why. And here's where the economic impact really does. And I'm going to leave this with you. So I like the idea that if you go back and you say you have to pay for the impacts, we have the numbers. We can definitely point to this is what it's going to cost the state if Arizona's water is what's targeted, if Yuma County's water is what's targeted. There are 175,000 acres of crops irrigated with Colorado River water, and it's managed by 7 irrigation districts. Not only is Yuma County Arizona's agriculture epicenter, but Yuma is ranked in the 99.9 percentile of the United States for cash sales in agriculture. So think about that. 99.9% of the U.S. cash sales come from here. So what that means is cash receipts are $1.4 billion annually, and this doesn't include the support industries that have been up here talking. If you build that into the GDP, it's $3.2 billion is what the economic impact is to the state of Arizona. I know we've said a lot about Yuma County. I'm talking about the state of Arizona. You can look at Intel and realize the impact of Intel to the state of Arizona. It's one industry. This is a conglomeration of industries, and that's why no one can get their arms around it. So let's focus on the dollar. It's $3.2 billion, and it is an industry. It's not one company like Intel, but it is an industry. Now, location quotient, that is a ratio that is used to determine the amount of employment in a region. So for Yuma County, the location quotient, first, second, and third place industries are agriculture. Okay, so that's employing over 70% of Yuma County residents is agriculture. Food security continues to be a growing concern, which has been talked about at length up here. And food security is all over the world. This is an impact from all over the world. If Yuma County's water is redirected and Yuma County can no longer farm that 175,000 acres that is currently feeding the nation and other countries, the need to open up our borders is going to be expedited and exponentially greater than it is today, because we're going to be getting that product from Mexico now. We're not going to be getting it here.
About 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, I would like to say, for the state of Arizona, for every $1 that is spent on agriculture in Yuma County, $5 comes back to the state, because this is all exported. So for the state to target this water, it's impacting its own coffers. So I certainly hope growing homes in a water-restricted area does not take precedence over an entire economy in another area of this state. And if it does, the few will directly impact the needs of this entire country. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm going to leave this in the box so you have those numbers, because I'd love to charge them the $3.2 billion if they do try and impact our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ Jones and Ken Rosenbeer next.
Wow, I'm in front of Ken. That'll be interesting. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Madam Chairman Barton and other members. It's great to be here, see your faces. You're all familiar. And I want to compliment you for the spectacular job you're doing, Chairman Barton, as my successor in the Agriculture and Water Committee in the House. And Representative Mitchell, I want to thank you very much for your stand on and sticking with this community on this very important issue with regard to 2338, and especially you, Brenda, for your courageous stance on this bill. The point I think I'll try to make is going to be a little bit different. I think I want to look at kind of the big picture, more of a holistic approach to water that we haven't touched on. And 2338, and as well as the work of the WRDC, which is great work. I followed all the way through its deliberations, and some great projects, great ideas that are in that. We shouldn't just throw the baby out the bathwater. There's some good work in there that needs to be brought back and worked on for the future. But to me, 2338 is again, it's putting the cart before the horse with regard to water. I recognize that, and I think most of us do, that as municipalities, agriculture, mining, industry, as they acquire, purchase water, and they are retaining, recapturing that water, processing it for reuse, creating used water, that is true water augmentation, and we need processes to manage that for limited transfers of that type of water, as well as brand new water that we haven't even really talked about through the state. So constructs like water augmentation authorities may be something that's necessary, But to me, again, it's putting the cart before the horse. It's creating fiefdoms without creating a kingdom. And I refer to the ADWR, that we have stripped funding to over 70% over the last 6 to 8 years as an agency. And when we should be funding it with a sustainable source of revenues and empowering it to look at these types of issues, take the good work of folks that worked on the and volunteered for the WRDC and what's coming out of that, and work with grassroots and communities to come up with ways to manage these types of things. You know, we've been on this path, this collision course that 2338 is the symptom of, ever since the Arizona Groundwater Act was created back in the 80s. And we created AMAs, active managed areas. And we created them knowing full well that some of them weren't sustainable at the time they were created. And that's what the force is behind what we're doing today. And until we step back, until the legislature has the courage to collectively work on and deal with groundwater outside the AMAs and the proper management regulation of all of our water resources and conservation, which what Shelley referred to, Tunis, that managing our water resources throughout the state before we start targeting surface water that the Colorado River represents and all of its tributaries. I'm
I hate
going
to
to
interrupt you,
close.
Mr. Jones. We have about 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to close with this, because I remember on at least 2 different occasions, 3 actually. One was a lunch, and 2 times I was approached by folks that represent other water interests that start with a C in the state of Arizona, and was told, basically, when they want our water here in Yuma, they'll get it. And I just see 2338 as, again, as a symptom of that kind of an attitude which we need to get away from. We need to create more unity rather than fractionalize water interests in the states, which is what 2338 does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee, and I'm Ken Rosevear, and thank you for the committee for coming down. And I remember going up in February to give testimony at the legislature, and I'm just now getting my blood pressure down, so thank you for coming. I wanted to put a visual up here. This is a little of what we grow in Yuma. It's not just table crops, so I wanted to give you a kind of a feeling of the extent of what we do in this community with agriculture. And the comments have been made about 2338. In my opinion, it was a bad bill. One of the bad things about it was Yuma wasn't at the table. No one came down here and asked us for any input concerning 2338. One of the major water users in the Southwest, and an industry that is one of the largest industries in the state of Arizona. We weren't at the table. We've learned in Yuma over the years, in my job in the chamber, that we get things done by partnering. We get things done by coming together and gain consensus and use the expertise of one another to come to meaningful conclusions. We can't do that when we're not at the table. And I don't think that the expertise of water resides in the legislature. I think it resides in this audience. When you look at the way water is conserved in Yuma County with laser leveling and GPS and the other technologies that we use, we are the best stewards of water in the state of Arizona. And as you go to these other meetings in the state, I don't think that you'll hear people talk about a water need that supports an industry. You'll find a water need that supports many other things other than an industry that's probably 70% of the volume of income to this community and jobs. Agriculture is king in Yuma. The other 2 economic drivers of military and tourism don't even come near the $3.3 billion that agriculture does. I'm going to share a story with you. I lived in Imperial Valley for 18 years under the Imperial Irrigation District. And like Alexander Ford, I was a car dealer, and I sold pickup trucks. And I used to sell about 1,200 pickups a year. When they started transferring water to MWD and then consequently to San Diego Water District, my pickup sales dropped in half. I sold half the pickups that I used to. Now they're fallowing land in Imperial, so that means no farm jobs to speak of. This is a really slippery slope when we talk about taking an asset from one part of a community and transferring it to another. And as many others have said, I don't think we need new legislation. The rules are in place to manage water in Arizona without what we're looking at. When I first looked at 2338, you know how I knew it was a new set of bureaucratic rules? It had a $30 million budget attached to it. That's how you could recognize that it was another bureaucratic labor. We could do this at a minimal cost of getting people around a table and negotiating how we manage water in Arizona. It doesn't take $30 million and it doesn't take new laws. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Karen Boren or Borner? And it's not your handwriting, it's just my inability. No? Oh, there we go. How about Tim Dunn?
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Dunn, third-generation farmer, born and raised here in Yuma. Thank you for committee for coming down and doing what you're doing and hearing the voices of Arizona. We appreciate that. We're newcomers to Yuma. We've only been here since the late 50s. So, but we moved from the central Arizona, Eloy area because of water, because my uncle was looking for more access to better ground, better availability, more availability of water. And if you go back to all the presenters that have presented before me, they've spoken on a lot of the issues I was going to talk about. But when you go to the dams and you see 1909 on the bridges, and you see 1938 on the tunnels where the water goes to feed the Walton Mohawk Irrigation District for the helogravity, you know we've been doing this thing for a long time, and we've always been worried about federal law changing and changing the compact so that LA or San Diego would take our water, and the state of Arizona still has to worry about that, because there's more votes in California than we have, and that's what we've always been worried about. So augmentation is important. How we can further stretch the water that we have in Arizona is important. And I think the concerns you've heard from Yuma is that we think the thought was augmentation is automatically to come to get water from Yuma. And that's truly not what the definition is, although that is our concern because we were afraid of LA doing it. We'd be afraid of our fellow Arizonans doing it too. So we need to look at how we can stretch the water we have in Arizona. With it, those farmers, our fellow farmers here in Arizona here in Yuma have been augmenting water within our districts our whole life. We've been developing 2 crops per acre. We've been stretching it with drip irrigation. We've been laser leveling, GPS leveling. So we've been stretching our water, and we've been developing an infrastructure that you've heard of. And this is our intel. As the water rights and the negotiations over the past 50 years in central Arizona has allowed the city of Phoenix and those districts to take the water from those farms because that was the contracts they signed, we chose to develop our districts and develop an infrastructure with the produce that feeds the country. An infrastructure that is developed on water rights, on zoning. If you go into our zoning laws, everything is strictly hinging upon the agricultural base of our Yuma County. And you've heard plenty of testimony to that. But this is not just by happenstance. It's not just because we have the water here. It's because we've developed the infrastructure based on the climate and the water that we have. And so as a society we truly think we need more water for more people, the people can come to where the water is. We can put 2 million people on the mesa. We can do that, so we don't necessarily need to move water to where the people is. If you go outside of Maricopa, there's areas of that area that have no water, and people have to haul their water to their homes. Their land's not worth very much. There's only 1 person per 30 acres. It's not very valuable because they don't have water. So as you look at, this is not just by happenstance. Yuma's developed the industry, and this is our intel, and this is what is critically important to the food security of the country. And one of the big problems I had with House Bill 2338 was the ability for someone to buy water from a certain area even if you took Yuma out of it, buy water from a certain area, have eminent domain authority, and channel that water to another part of the state. And so, that, from anybody else in the state, should think of that as bad legislation by itself. So look forward to further discussions as you guys move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here other than Mr. Noble that has filled out a slip that hasn't been called on? If there is, please come up. Okay, then we'll hear from Wade Noble. You have 20 seconds.
My name is Wade Noble, and you've heard from about everybody in the room. And if my understanding of what they said is correct, Yuma really opposes HB 2338. Now, for the four of you that are here today, that creates a problem, because politically, you're working on a bill that is opposed strongly in Yuma County. I'm here today representing Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition. Herb is scratching his head because he's never heard of it before. And the truth is, it was only formed on Wednesday. That is the coalition of the irrigation districts and the Yuma County Water Users Association. That coalition opposes this bill. Why is that meaningful to you? Because they're the ones that hold the contracts for the agriculture water. We appreciate your coming down here. You've heard from a number of people. Perception is reality in politics. We hope to see you in the other jurisdiction, the other places you're going, but again, we acknowledge to each of the members of the committee in the cases that price has been paid for your position. We appreciate that. It does not go unheeded. It will be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, because we thought you might bring tomatoes to throw at us today, we went ahead and planted a couple representatives in the audience. So I want to recognize them. One is on our committee, both represent Yuma. Juan Carlos Escamilla is here, if you'd stand up, Juan. And also Senator Pancrazzi, who understands she runs Yuma completely by herself. So we put them out there because they'd be easy to attack. So that's it for public testimony, unless there's somebody that wants to say something. Does the committee have any comments? Okay. Mr. Pratt?
Well, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, for being here. I've seen a lot of familiar faces here today. There are a lot of thoughtful comments, many with a lot of passion, and a lot of diversity, too. There's been comments that have brought back some great memories, speaking of Laguna Dam and a lot of other things. We've talked about the food importance and the importance to the local economy here. I would congratulate you on a true sense of community here. Everyone in the area seems to be united and supporting one another. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today.
Thank you. Ms. Atondo?
Yes. I just want to say I am so happy that we are here in an open forum discussing this matter. You know, it's really important that all of you know that my family still owns land in Walton Mohawk Valley. I am a Yuma girl. I will stand up for this community. I felt it really important when 2338 came down. I threw myself at this bill. Now, Juan Carlos Escamilla is on the committee, and I'm not. And I went directly to the Democratic leadership, and I said, please, I beg of you, let me be the rural liaison. And I did that under the guidance of Lynn Pancrase, who represents us well here in Yuma. And I went directly to Speaker Tobin and voiced my concerns, and Herb knows he was in Costa Rica, and I was calling him constantly. He is the guru of water, in my opinion. Before my father passed, he said to me, Lisa, if there's anything you promise me you always talk to her before you make any decisions on water. And I think that speaks for all of us in Yuma. We have appreciated your service. I was really glad when Speaker Tobin formed this committee. And I too want to thank Representative Barton for having the courage, and really for all of the members on the Water and Ag for holding it and allowing this to occur and listen to our concerns. We will be still traveling through the state, Flagstaff and Payson, Sierra Vista, and Prescott, to be listening to other voices. And I would like to see real augmentation in Arizona. Please know that my votes, my movements in the legislature will be reflective of Yuma. Thank you for this time. Thank you, everyone, and especially thank you to Herb Gunther and the people, the analysts. Tammy Stowe has put so much time in this, as has Ms. Cash, and I just really appreciate everybody for bringing this together, because it's important to us. Thank you.
Herb, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, it's just been a pleasure. I've always known the good people of Yuma. I had the good privilege of representing them for many years in both the House and the Senate. But what really impresses me is that when you speak from the heart. And that sincerity is priceless. So, I'm very pleased that you all turned out and said what spoke from your heart and gave us a good feeling about what the Yuma community and the agricultural significance of this area is to not only the state but the nation. So, it's... Someone once told me that the probability of somebody watching is directly proportional to the stupidity of your action. And so I've been very careful as to what I do and where I am. So anyway, I don't suffer from insanity. I enjoy every minute of it.
Thank you. Chairman Barton?
Yes, thank you. I have appreciated each and every one of you as you shared with us and have made it an official sharing of your information and your ideas. I believe that this is a community challenge. That's why we are going to travel throughout the state and listen to each of the communities and their ideas that they can present to us. I think that's important. June 14th, we will be in Sierra Vista, and so that's the next place that we'll be. It should be interesting as well. They have situations in that region of Arizona a little different than what Yuma has, but nonetheless, they have some challenges with their water. So, of course, it's an open forum, and we'd appreciate it if, I know that those there are those of you here that intend to go to the other meeting, so that will be fabulous. And we're going to put all this information together and have a consensus that's good for Arizona and does no harm to the communities. That's the main thing. We want to move forward in a positive manner. Appreciate each and every one of you being here. Thank you to all of the staff that got up very early this morning to make the drive and put this together. They did a great job for you, and I think you've appreciated it and appreciated them being here with us, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to echo what my co-chair have said. They're right on the mark. And I want to thank all of you guys for coming out today and taking time out of your day, a work day no less, to tell us what you feel about water and this issue. But I do want to remind some people that the 2338 is held, so we're not going to be dealing with that. So I want to relieve some of the fears. Hopefully we'll be able to come up with something better, if anything at all. It should be better. And I just want to thank you for coming out and being part of the process. So thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.